Good afternoon, everyone. And today, again, I'm joined by Tanya Mullally from EMO, Kim Griffin from Maritime Electric, and we have Bill Lawler back from the Canadian Red Cross to provide an update on our recovery process. I just begin to say to all islanders to start with the rather obvious point, but one worthy of being stated or restated, and that is that it's been a long, difficult and emotional 9 days in our province, and that I know people are tired. I know people are frustrated, and I know how much we would all like to move beyond this and have it in our rearview mirror. I know there are still thousands of islanders without power, and even though progress is getting made, it's not fast enough. It's never fast enough. And as hard as I wish I could, and all of us at this table wish we could, I can't make it go any faster. I wish I could. But the undertaking is just, it's so labor intensive and painstaking and difficult work. We have hundreds of crews and hundreds of people working extensive hours, and they're going as fast as they can, and they're making good progress. But while we are grateful for that effort, we know what islanders really want to hear is that all of our power is restored and we're moving forward, and that's what we're all working hard to get to. At the same time, we know it's important that we're making positive steps forward, even if sometimes it doesn't feel like that, but we are making some. I mean, school is open for many today. Work is coming back online for many islanders. Our historic cleanup continues. And these are just a few of the positive steps that we've made forward, as I said, even if at times it doesn't feel like it. There are also so many wonderful examples of humanity, of goodness and kindness of islanders to one another. And I guess it never ceases to amaze me just, how islanders seem to be so good at finding optimism in the difficulty. Several times a day on the weekend, as I talked to islanders, I heard so many of them say things like, it could be worse, could have been worse. Look at what's going on in Florida. And it just seems to be ingrained in the good nature of islanders to find that silver lining in the darkest clouds. And, I think personally I've needed to hear that a lot this weekend, and I know that it's probably even more important for us to hear it over these last few days, all islanders. So, but I also know, I'm a realist, I know that as each day passes, that gets harder and harder, particularly given all we've had to endure in this province for the last 3.5 years. So for what it's worth, and I hope it's worth something, I think you're the most resilient, understanding, and kindest people in the world, and you give strength to one another, and in that strength we find the courage to get through this together. So thank you for that. And as hard as it can be in these days ahead, please continue to show that. It does mean the world. We have been focusing our efforts on the things that we can help with, trying to get help out the door as fast as we can into the hands of those who need it, and that has been ongoing. We are getting that help out the door, and we know there are gaps. We're working hard to identify those gaps, but this is all coming at everybody in very real time, and we're working through some difficult situations to try to identify those gaps, and we'll continue to do so. Many islanders have asked if we can make it easier to access these programs or better understand what programs are out there for immediate assistance. So we have added a more up-to-date information on our storm response webpage, and we're also working on updated handouts with information that will be available at our reception centers across the province. And Bill, of course, is here to help us explain how the Canadian Red Cross is playing such a big role in our recovery process and our assistance. So, and for those who are listening in, I'll give you just a very general recap because you've asked me for that as well. So there's the $250 for island households that have been impacted by Fiona that's being administered by the Canadian Red Cross. There will be a further update, but we have identified and registered over 5,000 applicants that will begin issuing electronic payments as early as today. So that's a good start, but we know much more work remains, and Bill will give us more on that. For seniors, the applications are being accepted for the Seniors Grocery Gift Card Program. If you've been enrolled in that program in the past, you don't need to apply. It will just be sent to you immediately, and that has been underway. In total, we're reaching over 7,000 to date, so that's been a good program. We've also increased the Seniors Independence Initiative to provide an additional $150 to each client that are registered with us, and that money is rolling as well. Through the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, we continue to triage and assess all those who have registered for our debris cleanup program. To date, we've received over 1,600 web applications, 2,250 phone calls, and 500 submissions by email, so over 4,300 requests already, and they continue to roll in. So that's good information for us to have, and we've begun to execute on that. We've launched the wage rebate program, of course, for businesses, NGOs, and municipalities to provide up to 100% wage replacement for up to $25 an hour for 4 weeks. And that's that's been rolling out as well. And if need be, we can continue this program if needed. We've also launched the Provincial Disaster Financial Assistance Program, which provides islanders, businesses, municipalities, and NGOs coverage for uninsured losses from Hurricane Fiona. This program is accepting applications, and that's another one of the programs that are being administered by the Canadian Red Cross. We also have the Emergency Jobs Initiative underway. Dozens have already taken advantage of that, but if you've lost your seasonal job because your place of business is ceasing operations for a variety of reasons, or if you just want to work, there's going to be help for you here. So we look forward to that as well. And as I say, we have tried hard to make this as easily to understand and access as possible. So check out our storm response webpage, and plus we have other avenues as well for us to contact for those who are in need. So at the same time, while the cleanup is underway, so too are the rebuilding and restoration efforts. Today, in partnership with the Construction Association of Prince Edward Island, we're creating a database of islanders needing assistance with repairs and restorations for their homes and businesses. We're trying to have a service here that can match those in need with contractors as soon as possible. While we know the construction industry was going full tilt before Fiona, we also know that these contractors are our local neighbors and friends, and speaking with many of them, they want to do everything they can do to help as many islanders as possible. So we're trying hard to play matchmaker, I guess, for lack of a better explanation with this regard, and to get that help to islanders as quickly as we can. To connect with the construction associations are registered to be part of this, you can call 902-370-HELP, which is 370-4327, or you can email FionaHelp@capei.ca. In addition, we said this last week and we'll say it again, if there are contractors either locally, regionally, or nationally who want to assist here in Prince Edward Island and want to be connected with those islanders in need, they can also reach out to the Construction Association by emailing contractors@capei.ca. We're really trying to get all hands on deck on our response here, and we'll continue to do so. And finally, before I turn it over to Tanya, not only is this the biggest storm that's ever hit us, we know the volume of the damage is the biggest ever, and we know that will require the biggest response from government ever in terms of financial assistance. We're in constant contact with the federal government. They understand the challenges that we're facing. We have made it known to them that we will need their help in a big way, and that we will need them working side by side with us to recover from Fiona. They have reassured us that they will respond. Not only will we need more federal money, we will also need greater flexibility in some of these existing programs that are in place. And where possible, we have asked and will continue to ask the federal government to see a response time in program delivery similar to what we witnessed during the COVID-19 response, where there was a priority placed on getting programs out the door and into the hands of islanders as soon as possible. As I have continually said, we have enjoyed a very open and honest dialogue with the federal government over the last 3 3.5 years, and we will need to lean on that more than ever in the days ahead to help Islanders get through this. So again, a lot to digest in a short time, but we're trying to be as open and upfront with Islanders as we can. And with that, I will turn it over to Tanya for an EMO update.
Thank you, Premier. I will keep my comments brief. They always start with our priorities and, safety being the primary one. Certainly as we work through power restoration and road clearing, it's, again, paramount that people stay safe, and that's not only through use of generators, barbecues, all of those things. One of the things, just even noting, driving at night, there's lots of people that are piling up brush along the roadways or along the driveways, and just to be really mindful, to be aware of what's on the roadside, so that that you guys stay safe on the roads as well. So PEI EMO, we're still, fully activated, doing all the same work. There's not much has changed in our office. We still have probably over 50 people in person, and then we have several others that are attending virtually, all with prioritizing, the restoration efforts with Maritime Electric, with all the partners to make sure that the needs are met for Islanders. As well, municipal affairs and all our municipalities, like they're doing, a fantastic job supporting their residents. So we're kind of keeping linked in really closely with them to ensure that they have whatever they need to be able to share with residents as well. Just a little update with our ground search and rescue folks. They've been doing check-ins, wellness checks, where you would email or give a call. So we're going to continue on with that service as long as there's need in the community. We hope to maybe get them out a little bit more and knocking on some doors more proactively in the areas that we know still don't have power. So you may see somebody arriving at your doorstep, but they will be well identified, I would say, and it's really just around making sure everyone's okay, and then directing you to any resources that might be available to you. So as the Premier mentioned, we have rolled out lots of supports, and certainly even though we are still in response, until power is fully restored, we will roll into that recovery, but recognizing that some people are ready to do that recovery work. So again, we're launching the Provincial Disaster Financial Assistance Program, and one of the key messages that the Insurance Bureau has asked us to share is to make sure that individuals go to their insurance companies first. That's really one of the first steps, is contact them, see what losses might be coverable underneath your policy program, and then as we go to the next steps of our Provincial Disaster Assistance Program, you can go online to do the self-assessment tool. And if it's determined that you are eligible for that program, it will bridge you right into the Red Cross program that Bill's going to speak to in a few minutes. I think that's all I have. I'm going to pass it over to Kim with Maritime Electric. Nice and brief.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Premier. Good afternoon, everyone. Over the weekend, we restored power to approximately 13,000 of our 83,000 customers. So 80%, of our customers are restored across PEI. We still have about 16,500 customers that we need to restore power to. While we made progress, and I'm thankful to the many men and women across Maritime Electric who are supporting us from all of the departments who have rallied to help us, thousands remain without power. Firstly, I want you to know that we are not sending any crews home who are here to help you. They are staying to help us. And I will say that again. We are not sending any of these crews home. We've had a number of people ask us that question in our restoration efforts, and I want to assure you that with Hurricane and with Fiona, that we are absolutely focused on making sure that we get the power back on to everyone and that no one's leaving until we're there. Today, we have 216 crews from Fortis BC, Fortis Alberta, Fortis Ontario, Newfoundland Power, and all in between from coast to coast to help Maritime Electric, as well as New Brunswick Power, Summerside Electric, H-Line, and others. Contractors are boots on the ground, as we say at Maritime Electric. So our goal is to have thousands more on today and tomorrow, but I'm going to list them in a little more detail because that's what you've been asking me to try and provide. You've asked me to provide even more detail if I can, and I'm going to take the next few minutes and share with you the details and the estimations directly for your neighborhood. These are the best estimates, and I'm also going to have them posted on our website this afternoon at about 5 o'clock. And I just want to stress that they are estimates, but at the same time, I want you to have an idea of the thousands and thousands of jobs and communities that our crews are working from tip to restore. So Gaspereau, I'll start there, but we have, so from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we see key neighborhoods that we're going to be focusing on. So what we're going to do is list the neighborhood, and then we're going to list the numbers that are out, and then we're going to list the approximate end of day that we expect to have those, the vast majority of those on. So for example, Gaspereau, we're looking at Wednesday, Sturgeon Tuesday, Launching Wednesday, Georgetown Royalty Wednesday, Beach Point Wednesday, Georgetown Wednesday, Peters Road Tuesday, White Sands Wednesday, Baldwin Road Wednesday, Caledonia Wednesday, Cape Traverse Wednesday, Fortune Cove Tuesday, Malpeque Wednesday, O'Leary Tuesday, Kensington Tuesday, South Freetown Tuesday, Central Kildare Tuesday, Alberton Tuesday, Kildare Capes Tuesday, in Charlottetown, Hillsborough Park Tuesday, Upper Queens Wednesday, Parkdale Tuesday, and Brighton by Wednesday. In Stratford, there's one large part of the community in Stratford in the Keppoch area that are out, and we're focused on crews for them by Wednesday. Mermaid Tuesday, Johnson's River Tuesday, Stanley Bridge Wednesday, New London Wednesday, West Cofed Tuesday, Meadowbank Tuesday, Dona Tuesday, Mount Herbert Tuesday, Marshfield Tuesday, Springvale Tuesday, North Rustico Tuesday, Glenfinnan Wednesday, Vernon Bridge Wednesday, Frenchfort Tuesday, and New Glasgow Tuesday. I'm going to be sharing online over 106 neighborhoods across the island, and we're going to update those every day to the best of the information that we have so that you can plan. Warming centers are still needed, and we thank everyone in communities across Prince Edward Island in these areas who are helping. Also, we still need neighbors and islanders to continue to reach out to your neighbors who may be in need. We still have heard hundreds of stories. There are people that are living alone, people who are new to PEI, they don't know our ways, and they're scared too. We thank you for helping them and doing what you can. A call, a wave, a high five, or an invite goes a long way so people know that they're not alone, and we've seen that demonstrated from tip to tip on this island during Fiona. Our crews are working to restore those lines into your area so we can get your power back on as quickly as we can. The next thing you've asked me about is what about individual outages? How bad are they? What are customers saying? And what's this going to look like? This is a little bit more challenging, but it's the best that I have, and I want to share with you based on the experience from past storms as well as knowledge. Knowledge from our crews, knowledge from our superintendents, knowledge from our technicians in the field in East, West, and Central who are on the ground assessing this damage. So you can plan. We now expect to have 10,000 individual customers remaining out across the island based on our current assessments. So Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we're going to be focusing our crews on these neighborhood areas that I've listed, and which we're going to post in more detail on our website at 5 o'clock, the best knowledge that we have. Then we're going to focus and redeploy whatever crews are left. So as they get these communities or neighborhoods on, then we're going to deploy them to work on the smaller and individual outages. Now, we don't have eyes on all these individuals yet, but we do have several reports from our customers about the damage, and particularly around the masts. I assure you, we will be reassigning these crews to help in these smaller outages and individual outages. These crews are coming your way. In Dorian, we had probably hundreds of masts down. So in the hundreds of masts, I believe the number was about 7. I'll have to go back and confirm later. But of the masts that we had down, we had that, but we also had 7,500 individual outages. So if you'll recall a second ago, I told you we're estimating about 10,000 for Fiona. So we believe, and knowing from what we did from Dorian, of the 7,500 individual outages that we had, that took us about 4 days with the hundreds of crews that we had on the ground to help us, including contractors. Now remember, there were still some cottage owners or people that weren't able to either get an electrician or had road access routes if they were a cottage and it wasn't passable till the spring, etc. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the high 90 percentile of people that we're going to get to. Customer individual mass reported are 1,281. We continue to hear about this damage and the devastation on our homes and in the areas for these customers. We have 360 registered electricians on Prince Edward Island. And as the Premier had mentioned, we're reaching out and asking people to also, if they want to help, to do so. But we, like you, Premier, have seen so many people reach out and offer that up, even though we have a very, very busy season. Maritime Electric has supplies, and we have resources on PEI. So what does all of this mean? When I say 10,000 individual outages, what does that mean? Firstly, these neighborhoods, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we're going to redeploy the crews after those areas are on, or in some cases, they're able to go a little earlier depending on the region. We believe that we can have the vast majority of individual outages, so those 10,000 that I spoke about, completed by this Sunday, based on our crews and the information that we have today. So we're targeting for this Sunday. There still may be some smaller pockets of individual outages or reasons that we can't get to them, but we're going to take over 200 and some crews and redeploy them to these individual outages. So overall, we've had some gains by our crews with Fiona restoration, no question. Thank you, everyone who's working so tirelessly behind the scenes. And you know, we're not looking for praise at all. We just want to get the job done for you and get your power back on. Lastly, thank you to all the behind-the-scenes frontline, first responders, government personnel and public service, police, fire, medical, highway crews, armed forces, and to anyone who lost loved ones, no matter what the cause, we extend our deepest sympathies to you. While thousands of people have been kind to our crews and Fiona restoration teams, our crews have been dealing with distracted drivers. Someone even hit a crew with our employee truck, or with our truck. They're fine. They were setting up a job site. But people are rattled on our team by things like that. They need to focus on getting the power on and not be thinking about anything else. Their job is to make sure that they safely restore power, and we want them to go home to their families just like you do. We thank the RCMP, City Police, people who have helped us when we've had a couple of irate situations. We understand. We understand and know that you just want your power on. But our crews are doing their best to restore our power as quickly as possible. And they have expressed to me that when some people have approached their work sites, they've been nervous about it. But more importantly as well, they've also been distracted, or it's added to their restoration times. I would like to plead with Islanders and ask you to please not approach our work sites, both for your safety and the safety of our crews. It can be very dangerous for the public, and we want everyone to be safe. It can also, as I mentioned, slow down our restoration efforts, and the crews are trying to work as quickly as possible to get everybody back on. And just because you don't see a crew working in front of your house or on your street doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't working on your outage. Some houses or streets are connected to parts of the distribution system located in another area, and we can sometimes reroute power from other areas to get more customers on faster. And if we can safely do that, we will. We have the largest restoration team in our company's history working to get the job done with our Maritime Electric team. They are making more and more progress every day, and we won't stop until all of our customers are restored. Thank you, Premier.
Now, Bill, from Red Cross, do you want to give us a quick update on how things are progressing from your end with program delivery?
Thank you, Premier. I would be happy to, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll start just, we certainly are aware as the Red Cross, we are paying very careful and close attention to what's happening on the ground and in the communities throughout the island. And we know this is a confusing time when you consider the incredible amount of stress and anxiety that many are dealing with. So it's my intention and hope today that I will alleviate some of the confusion on what's happening with the Red Cross. I'll just give a brief high-level overview, but certainly I'm here to support. We as the Red Cross are here to support the province of Prince Edward Island and every islander who has been impacted by Hurricane Fiona. I'm going to back up and start to the storm day. Before the storm was even passed through Atlantic Canada, our region, we opened up the registration call center as well as the online capabilities for those who did have it. We recognize, of course, Much of that was disrupted due to the utility challenges that happened with Hurricane Fiona, but those numbers are certainly increasing to this very day. So we started right off the bat from day one before the storm finished through. As of today, we have, just within the province of Prince Edward Island, we have just over 31,000 individuals who have registered, and that translates to just over 14,300 households. Throughout Atlantic Canada, throughout the region, we have 65,000 individuals who have registered, who have been impacted by Fiona. In the other provinces, this is including Prince Edward Island, and just over 30,000 households. So indeed, the numbers are growing. As people have their services restored, they're either registering online or they're getting to call us now to register. And the reality is many people were quite busy and occupied, very understandably so, by making sure that they were taking care of their properties and trying to assess their own damage to determine, what am I going to do next? And we're seeing that those numbers are increasing quite dramatically every day. I would love to offer another gentle reminder. If you are just receiving services now, if you haven't heard the message before, please, the registration, the phone lines, and online portal is open. The phone lines are open till 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And of course, you can register online at any time at your convenience if you are able to do so. We don't have any intention in closing that registration line anytime soon. And whenever that does occur, we will make sure that Islanders have plenty of notice, but it will be open for quite some time to come. Soon after that, we began supporting shelters and reception centers. It's been lots of reference, at each of these press briefings about the wonderful community resilience and support throughout the island. Red Cross reached out to those. In some cases, they reached out to us through the Tanya's team at EMO to require and request certain supplies that could be cots or blankets or other various supplies that you would need in the shelter or reception center. And Red Cross was able to provide support to those particular communities who did make that request. We've also, right from the get-go, in advance, in fact, of the storm, at the request of the province, helped to establish a reception center for those who are along the tent encampment, those who were certainly very vulnerable to the impacts of Fiona. That was the center itself was being managed by the province, the provincial staff. The Red Cross worked to establish it, find the location, connect, and set it up with our cots and blankets to make sure that those would be safely brought in out of the storm. Also, through our own programming and at the request, of the province, we've been reaching out to what we know, or who we know, I should say, to be vulnerable seniors who are isolated. Some of the cases, we had some clients on the island through a friendly calls program that we have, so we already knew about them. And then working through the Department of Social Development and Housing, they provided us with a further list so we could reach out and do some checks to make sure that people are doing okay. And this is to complement, not to duplicate, but you've heard some of the other organizations who have been going out and going door to door to do those wellness checks as well. So we've been just complementing and supporting that, again, at the request of the province. As has been announced on Friday, in fact, it was on Thursday when the official request came to Red Cross. Would we be interested and would we have the capacity to support the province's initiative to distribute $250 per eligible household throughout the province? So that was on Thursday. The Premier announced it on Friday, and throughout the weekend, teams on both within the provincial government workforce and on the Canadian Red Cross side have worked day and night to get this implemented, as quickly as possible. It does take time, and we certainly appreciate and respect some of the challenges and the financial strain and pressures that many Islanders are faced with right now. As the Premier announced, 5,000 of those folks who have registered with the Red Cross will receive today their funds, the $250 per household, by electronic funds transfer. That's just the start. We're just starting today. This will continue each and every day, and we'll be able to provide updates to make sure that people are aware where we are at in the process. If you do not do electronic banking, and there are many who don't, and that's quite okay, it doesn't exclude you from this opportunity. We are still putting together some of the final pieces for that in-person support, and you would have the option of either receiving a check, which will take a little bit longer. We have to get the check mailed and sent to you, or we have the opportunity and ability to provide a prepaid credit card with the same $250 on it that you will be able to use wherever you would use any other credit or debit card throughout your communities. And lastly, what the Red Cross, not lastly, two more. disaster financial assistance, as has been discussed by Tanya and referenced by the Premier King as well. I do want to make it very clear, or try certainly to clarify some of the confusion. And we understand there's been a lot announced in the last few days, but the $250 per household that we are offering and providing on behalf of the province of Prince Edward Island is not connected, related in any way, shape, or form to the Disaster Financial Assistance Program. The $250, as announced by the Premier, is to provide that urgent financial cash injection into the household for you to use on whatever the most pressing and urgent needs are for you at this time. Disaster financial assistance is more about working with properties, whether it be residential, commercial, small business, aquaculture, agriculture, all those types of damages that would have to, you work with your insurance provider to determine if insurance is going to cover it. If it's not an insurable situation, then we walk people through a process. I'll give more details later, just in the interest of time, but just to give an overview and make sure that's really clear. The $250 has nothing to do with DFA, and DFA, or pardon me, disaster financial assistance, has nothing to do with the $250. They are two separate initiatives, both of which are being offered through the Canadian Red Cross, both on behalf of the province of Prince Edward Island. And lastly, we have a team on the ground today who's also helping us within the Red Cross to do a bit of an assessment of impact. There's lots of organizations doing assessments within their own purview. Government, there's having assessments underway. Certainly, Kim and her team at Maritime Electric are doing assessments as they continue to re-energize the province. We are looking at ways of really trying to identify some service gaps, if there are any, and we know that the needs are going to continue to grow. And this is where we're going to also help to develop the plan for the funds that the Canadian Red Cross has raised. And I'd like to update you that as of today, the Canadian Red Cross has raised $13 million specifically dedicated to the response for Hurricane Fiona. Now, we know that there's a tremendous amount of needs out there right now, and we want to be able to provide as much support as quickly as we can. I expect in the next few days, we'll have a bit more of an announcement on how we're going to start to distribute those funds. Part of our challenge with this, and appreciating that most islanders are not really interested in what our challenges are, and that's fair comment, and we definitely respect that. We also need to know what is the level of impact so that we can design the most appropriate financial assistance from these donated dollars. There's nowhere you can go right now, anywhere, where someone can say, this is exactly the number of households that have been impacted on PEI or in any of the other provinces. What I can tell you is how many people have registered with us as the Canadian Red Cross. And while we know the impact has been vast and wide and significant for many, many islanders, many, many households, we really have to get a better understanding of what does that look like so that we can design these plans. Because as much as the urgent needs are there before us today, there are some circumstances, if not many, where the needs will be in fact significant and great for a much, much longer period of time. So it is our mandate, if you will, as the Canadian Red Cross, to ensure that we are using those entrusted donations to us the most effective way as possible to make sure that we are getting into the most urgent of needs throughout the region. Thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Bill. I appreciate that. Kim and Tanya as well. And I'm sure we have many questions from our friends in the media. We have two who are in the room here. I think I started with Sheehan last time, so maybe I'll start with Jack from CTV first in the interest of fairness.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you. So we heard a lot today. We got a lot of details from Maritime Electric, and I certainly appreciate that. Something that we didn't talk about today is senior homes. These are clearly critical pieces of infrastructure that are still, some of them, in the dark. Why at 10 days out have we not been able to get all of those back up?
Well, I can start by saying that some of them of particular interest, for example, in Charlottetown around Belvedere, for example, that was a complete rebuild. So it's not like we don't have them on the priority list. We absolutely do. The challenge has been the rebuild that our crews are trying to build in those areas to get to those centers and those important places. Please don't think they're not a priority, but as the infrastructure, particularly on the distribution lines, so as I'd mentioned before about the underwater sea cables were fine, the transmission was generally fine, our substations were fine. We had not significant damage in any of those places, but where the real damage occurred was the thousands of trees that had come down on our distribution lines, particularly with our poles, in the 800 or 900 range, and we have to rebuild all of that to get to those sections of areas. So in many of those cases, in fact, all of those cases, it's a direct result that we're rebuilding in that system and on our way to them.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm not sure exactly who the next question will go to, but I wanted to ask this. Maybe this is a question for Tanya. I'm glad that you've been out and upfront and giving people information with these updates, but many people who still don't have power, still don't have internet, are in their communities. Their neighbors don't have power, and in these communities, it seems like information isn't flowing quite as well. How are you reaching out specifically to those people who've kind of been isolated in communication?
Okay. Do you want me to start? Sure. So as I noted before, our ground search and rescue folks that are spread out across the province, over 100 folks in the province that have been able to do proactive, reaching out to individuals. If you had a relative or somebody that you wanted to check on, we can do that through that network. And then as we noted today, our intention is to start doing proactive door knocks. And again, our municipalities, they are our reach to all the communities. And I know our fire service, they know their communities the best, and they know where power is, where it isn't. So, speaking to one yesterday, they're being proactive and reaching to those people, individuals as well. I will also note is that we're printing materials, handouts that we can leave with reception centers so that when individuals do come in, or if they know that they can deliver them, they're handing those out to individuals as well.
Thank you again. And one more question, if you don't mind. Doing the quick math in my head, some people could be without power as late as Sunday from our most recent estimate. That's 15 or 16 days from the beginning. This question is specifically for you, Premier King. Is that an acceptable number?
Oh, listen, I wish everybody had their power. I wish we didn't have to endure Fiona the way we did, and I don't think it's ever acceptable to not have those services that we've come to rely on. But I mean, we also know we've been dealt a pretty big smash here that we've been trying to, make our way back from. And I know it's the island nature to, when you get hit, to pop back up. It's been a little harder to pop back up from this smash. But we're working hard to get to it. And I think that, my experience in dealing with islanders has always been, if you just be as open and honest as you can with them and tell them what the facts are, and try to help those who need help, we will, even if you don't like the news, you will be better prepared to deal with it. So, look, there's nobody working harder than the three people at this table and all the people we represent behind the scenes to try to get through this as fast as we can. And I tell you, the hardest job as Premier is when the people need help are in difficulty, and that's what we're dealing with now. We're trying to do the best we can, but I want them to have their power, Jack, and that's just as honest as I can be.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sheehan, CBC.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. So a question for Kim. You kind of touched on this a little bit in terms of the seniors' homes, but what are the specific challenges in the pockets that still don't have power?
It's all been about the damage and rebuild. So in some of those places, we've had to put the poles, full infrastructure back in. So it's not simply just stringing wire, as we say. So in some of those areas, they've had, I'll use the Belvedere area specifically. We had to do rebuilds there. In Mount Stewart, another area, pretty hard hit. All of those areas, if, when we were asking the crews specifically, as we have in our operations calls, how long are we thinking that this is going to take? And they're saying on average they're taking, 2.5 times long from a restoration perspective, longer than they took during Dorian, for example. And, we arrive on some sites and we think it's ready to go. And the site, for example, may not be secure. There could be large trees that look like they're going to come down. There could be danger trees around. There's been those types of situations because it was so moist with all that rain, and that was the significant issue for us. At the beginning of the storm, certainly, getting places was a challenge, but now it's just the rebuild, and in some places, replacing 6 and 7 poles and making sure that we're able to do that job. I always say jerry rig to them. Can you jerry rig that and just kind of connect this and this other piece, which they don't like to hear that, but I can tell you that they are working on the system to make sure that we safely restore. And if there's places where they can do that safely, they're trying to do that. But particularly if I can address the seniors' homes issue, I can tell you that any of the meetings I've been at, people have been advocating for us, and they've been hard on us to make sure that we get the power back on there. And I can assure you that it is because of infrastructure and getting to it and trying to rebuild it, and they have been on our priority list.
So the areas, I just want to confirm, the areas that don't have power, it's because the infrastructure actually has to be rebuilt.
In some situations, yes.
You mentioned that no crews will be going home until the power is back on. Are there more crews still coming, or is...
I think we have one more coming tonight, and I think that's about it. I'm really optimistic about the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday timeframe in terms of the pockets of neighborhoods. Getting 97 to 99% of those people on in those neighborhoods, and then redeploying those hundreds of crews to the individual outages. So we spent a lot of time trying to figure out, what we did in Dorian and what that looked like, and adding the fact that, it could take even twice as long, because that's what we're saying with Fiona. So we looked at that too, and then we said, okay, how comfortable are we with, is it Saturday, is it Sunday, is it Monday? So we feel very optimistic that it can be Sunday as close and as best in the Thanksgiving weekend as we can. Not ideal. We apologize to their families. Most of them have assured us anyway that they're going to stay. And I've never met such people either that are so committed to help PEI, and just some of the stories and places that some of these people have come from, particularly Newfoundland. We have one person that was here that had destruction in his community with his family and lost their house, and he's here to help us. So I must say it's that strong Canadian maritime islander spirit, whatever you want to call it, but I'm overwhelmed daily by the stories that I hear from people trying to help us. So I hope that helps your answer.
You mentioned, that in most cases with the power off, it's because the infrastructure needs to be rebuilt. What about the other instances?
Well, I think it's either I think we've covered just at the beginning of it when you asked the question. I just meant that we couldn't access it in the beginning. So then now that we can access it, the majority would either be a rebuild or putting up poles and wires, or getting there and needing. We had a situation where we had to take down a few more trees that we thought were okay. And we're hearing that from crews quite often when they get to a site. Even now, even though either people have gone ahead of us or spotters and assessed the damage, we're still hearing that. And it's just taking a lot longer, 2 times longer than it did in other storms. And that is a result of vegetation, or trees as I call them, but they call them vegetation. But it's trees and branches that have come down on us.
Thank you so much. Question for Bill. In terms of I just wanted to confirm, in terms of the $250 per household, the 5,000 people that have registered, are they receiving their money today, those 5,000 via e-transfer?
Yeah, just a point of clarification there. In order to be eligible for this specific $250 initiative on behalf of the province, one must register with the Red Cross and have that registration validated or verified, if you will. And all I mean by that is we want to make sure that we know that the person who's registered, or the head of household, as it were, is who they say they are, and they live where they say they live. Now, for the most part, just any type of a major response or a disaster such as Fiona brings out the absolute best in people, as Kim just gave an overview with her experiences. Unfortunately, there are some circumstances where it also brings out a number of bad actors. And people will try to take advantage of offerings when they really don't need it. We're not challenging those who have expressed the need for this. We're not going through and doing some type of verification of need within the household by household. The Premier was very clear in his message to us. Get this money out the door in the Islanders' hands as fast as you possibly can. And that's what we're doing. So to that end, as earlier mentioned, so there's 14,300 households who have registered within the island. I can't tell you today that all 14,000 are going to be eligible, not because of any type of verification need, but that we need to go through our process to verify precisely what I just described, that they are in fact someone who lives on the island. They've certainly given us an address that is on the island, but we're verifying that somehow there's a record somewhere that would connect that family to that property, whether they're living in an apartment building or a home, it doesn't matter, which is their primary residence. We need to validate that they are who they say they are. These 5,000 that are being supported today through the electronic funds transfer, all 5,000 we know have passed successfully through our authentication or verification process. So, because again, we're providing this money on behalf of taxpayers of Prince Edward Island. So we must make sure that we, have every check and balance done before we start issuing money. And that's a process that we've evolved over the years since we've started this type of a financial assistance program.
Got it. So 5,000 today. Any idea how many would be receiving money tomorrow?
I don't, but certainly at each day, we've committed to notifying the province each day for the next several days or through the next week how many get issued each and every day. So the big push one was to get those 5,000 out the door today. And that is underway as we speak. I received multiple verifications as this press conference has been ongoing. But again, it will happen every day. And if there's someone, just another thing to be clear, I mentioned this on Friday's press briefing, but if somebody does not get authenticated or verified, it doesn't mean that they won't be eligible. It just means we have to go through some extra steps in order to validate that they are, in fact, who they say they are and live where they say they live. So that might mean some more in-person interaction. And that's what I was referring to in my earlier comments. We just need a little bit more time to set that up. And I'm hoping in the next couple of days, we will have that. So they can come to a location, present us with some photo ID as an example, or some other form of proof of where their primary address is. And that way, then we'll do the work behind the scenes, either issue them electronic funds transfer if that's their preference, or through the other couple of opportunities in terms of check or prepaid credit card.
Got it. Thanks, Bill. And then just a couple questions for the Premier here. You listed a number of programs where people can apply to get financial support and funding. What would your advice be for an average Islander who doesn't have power, who doesn't have internet, who's not seeing these briefings? What should they do to get this support immediately?
Yeah, I think Tanya touched on that, but really, I mean, we're trying as hard as we can to get in touch with people, in a variety of different ways. So, I mean, we're obviously trying to rely on the good nature of Islanders as well. So if you think there might be somebody in your community or in your neighborhood who might be in need of help but could be in the dark, could we reach out? So we're really, trying to do the best we can in that. I mean, we're printing off things for the reception centers, and we're really trying to talk about it as much as we can. But we do know that there are some people who, are probably falling through the cracks in that regard. So we're just on a person by person basis or a household by household basis, trying the best we can to reach out to them and let them know that help is here. And we have a variety of different avenues to get through to government, but it sometimes 211 there's a 5 or 6 minute wait, for example, and so we know all that. And in spite of all that, we're just trying to reach out to the best we can. But it's imperfect for sure. So if you know anybody out there who you think we might be missing, please let us know and we'll do our best. Yeah.
I'm not entirely sure who this question would be for, but the military. How long will the military be here?
They're part of our emergency operations team, and they've basically said to us that they're committed to support the province as long as we need them. I think as the situation evolves, as Maritime Electric power is restored, they'll be reevaluating that every day. But certainly, as long as we are kind of declaring the need and for assistance, they'll stay with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sheila. I know we have some friends in the media who are joining us online, so can we open up the phone to those, please?
Cody McCackran, The Guardian.
Hello. question for Premier King. The province owns between 15 and 1,600 housing units for both seniors and public housing. I'm just wondering how many of those buildings have been equipped with generators that need them, and how often are those generators being checked or serviced by staff?
Yeah, I wouldn't know the full number of that, to be honest. I would have to get someone in our housing department or social development and other, transportation to give me that full extent. But if I could take this offline and get back to you, we will do that.
For sure. Do we know if there are generators going to those units, though? Like, I don't need a full number, but if there are some actually going.
Well, I know like some of our seniors housing would have backup generation that's, in place. And I think we've learned that some haven't. We've been working when possible to try to get some, temporary generation for common areas and things like that for buildings. But, as I say, to the full extent, I don't know offhand, to be honest. I mean, I think that we're learning a lot about ourselves in difficulty like this, and hopefully use that to be better prepared in the future. But I really don't know the full answer to that question at this time. But we'll try to get as much information out as we can on it.
Okay. A question for Kim. I've been hearing that maybe we might be hitting some issues with supplies for getting power back up, such as transformers. I'm wondering if you can give us kind of an update on the current situation with supplies to replace damaged equipment. Are we seeing any delay in getting those supplies, or do we have a surplus of them?
Yeah, if you would have asked me to predict that at the beginning of the storm, I probably would have been quite nervous. But I can tell you that from a procurement perspective, with COVID and everything else, that for this storm, we were well equipped before, but we have arrivals coming every day between poles and transformers. I think there might have been a truck stuck in Moncton that's en route on the transformer side. We've reached out to many of our sister utilities, everything from sleeves, wire. We review it many times a day and double check. To be fully transparent, we do ask our crews to take only what they need for the day. So that's just to make sure that when we go on sites, and if it's worse than we thought, that normally we take a little bit extra, but just based on our needs right now, we're making sure that people are taking what they need for the job, or give or take. But we're not certainly having lots of extra supply, but there is not an item that has been identified to me that we have not been able to access yet or is en route.
I've also heard at least one person online who put an account with customer service on there. I guess they had called in to report that, of course, trees are down in their area or in their yard, and their neighbors have power, but they don't. And the reaction from customer service was they laughed, and I could kind of see why. But I'm wondering, what is the protocol that you're recommending to people who they see their neighbors have power, they see their neighborhood have power, but they don't? Should they be calling into Maritime Electric to say, we have trees down, we don't have power, but everyone else does? What is the protocol there?
I'm sorry, I missed what you said had happened, the interaction that you explained to me. Was it a customer calling to say they had seen the power on across the street, but they had mentioned at their own home that they had a tree down and weren't able to have their power back on? Is that the gist of it?
Yeah, right, exactly. There was a tree down that's causing their power to not be on, so they called to let the customer service know. And I'm just wondering, what would you tell customers to do in scenarios like that, where they might be an individual without power as opposed to a neighborhood? Yeah,
so those individuals that I've mentioned, that falls into the large 10,000 number that I've mentioned from midweek into the weekend. A couple of things just for your information. We actually record every interaction and phone call with our customer service reps. And I can assure you that if a customer was speaking with one of our agents, they often do call about whether or not a tree can be removed just on a regular day-to-day basis. But as a result of Fiona, we've had a lot of customers that have had trees even on their roofs that weren't actually the reason that they didn't have power, believe it or not, and they're still calling. So there is a multiple probably multiple reasons why customers could be calling. But I did want to mention again that if a customer, if you look out your window and across the street, maybe your neighbors next to you don't have their power on, but people across the street, that just could be who you're being fed at. We say fed, but who you're energized through the line. It just depends. They're all different. And so that could be the reason why. If that's an individual outage and the tree is down because of the fact that it's down with a pole or a wire, then that's considered an individual outage at this point, and we will be dealing with those. If the customer is listening or is a friend of yours, or if they'd like to call back again and double check. But I think right now we have several hundred people that are calling right now with trees in and around their areas that we've added to that list. So I hope that helps to clarify for you.
And I know last week you had mentioned, or someone had asked about, burying lines and what that infrastructure would cost. And you mentioned that it'd be very expensive to do, although some neighborhoods are starting to do it. I'm wondering though now, is there considerations moving forward to maybe look at potentially burying some of those main lines or, the neighborhood or community feeder lines, maybe to provide a little more protection in the future?
Yeah, Maritime Electric is not opposed to that at all. That's something that we would definitely take a look at. And, we did price it out because we've looked at it for, not only the entire infrastructure, but also looked at it for areas with certain vistas, areas that are more, would prefer it more than others. And it has come down to, and I don't have it right in front of me, but somewhere in between 7 or 8 times to 10, 11, 12 times the cost that it would cost today. But that being said, a lot of the things that we've been talking about have been around, we used to talk about having a storm every decade, and now we're into having storms more often than that. And what we are seeing in our climate vulnerability assessment report that we're working on, that's being released at the end of this year, is that we're not really going to be talking about snowstorms and ice storms as much, but long term, over the next 30 to 50 years, is we're going to be looking specifically around climate change and those effects as it relates to high winds and rain and humidity. So that's a whole different set of discussion points and data points that we have to look for. We do plan our system decades in advance, so we have a complete department that focuses on our long-term planning. So those are the types of things that they're looking at for sure.
You mentioned, 8 to 10 times more expensive for those projects if we were to start burying those lines. But as you said, we're looking at more high wind storms in the future. I'm imagining you can't give me a for sure answer, but, does that seem worth it in the long run if we were to go that way?
I think it depends on the situation. I certainly see that there's some areas that you may even want to change your standards slightly. That's the kind of stuff that we're working on right now. So I can see both sides of it, but I also think that we need to study it a little bit more. I don't think we need to study it for the next 10 years, but I think it's something that, we have it on our radar. We've been asked about it pretty well every day as part of these briefings, and I know we're also being asked by customers. So it's up to us to make sure that we do that work and make sure that we include that information. As we talk about at Maritime Electric, you'll often hear anybody say about system hardening, they call it. It's just an industry term for saying, okay, what are the things that we need to build for climate change? What are the things that we need to do? And coastal flooding is also another one as we look at our core infrastructure, not only what we have, but what we're building for the future. And I think that that's a really important point that you're making, and I think we have to go back and look at it again. And maybe there's pockets. There's certainly customers that are asking it. We have many new developers that are looking for that as well. So the only caution I do say, in addition to cost, is also that when there is an outage, digging everything up to try and find the source is also more problematic too. So there's positives and negatives to both of that, but I think we have to take that away as a big takeaway from this event and at least have those discussions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You need me, the Guardian.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, I guess first question for Ms. Griffin. So if I heard you correct, the goal is to have 10,000 households back online by Sunday. By my math, that leaves about 6,000 households who are facing a longer wait. So can you tell me where those households are located? Like, are there specific areas that are going to be facing this longer wait?
Well, I think what I've been actually saying of the 16,500 that are left, as of an hour ago, if you take out the 10,000 that are the individual outages that I'm talking about from Wednesday into the weekend, we're hoping to get another couple of thousand on today and tomorrow. So, there's areas in Brackley, there's areas in Stanhope, and I was looking at my list after I was trying to go through my list respectfully and not take up too much of everyone's important time, but there's some areas in here that, whether it be West St. Peter's, when I look at even parts of Stanhope and Brackley that, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe even some into Friday. So what I'm trying to say is there's large neighborhoods that we're going to continue to focus on. But as some of those other ones get restored, so if you look at, a place like when we've been talking about Caledonia, there's 9 customers there that I'm talking about that we're trying to have on Tuesday or Wednesday. Well, the crew that's been deployed there is now going to be deployed to these individual outages. So those 10,000, we believe that we can have those with a full restoration mode between Wednesday and into Sunday and have 95, 96% of those people on.
Okay. And so I guess between now and Sunday, what is the number of households that you expect to be restored?
Well, I think if you're saying, is it better than 16,500, which would equal 100% of our customers, I don't think it would be fair of me to say that number. I'm not sure. I can give you some examples of what happened in Dorian, for example. So in Dorian, we did have a couple of 100 customers so Dorian lasted, I'll say to the full extent, about 10 days since it hit us. We had about 200 and some customers, I don't have the report right in front of me, but between 200 and 300 customers that were we were ready to energize their locations or their homes, but they were in a situation where they couldn't. So they could have been away for the for the time frame. They could have been that we couldn't get down their laneway, or they didn't want us to access it or wait till later. There were some that were cottages. So those were reasons that we were ready to energize, but those customers weren't ready for us. Some of them were waiting for electricians. Some of them were doing other things. So I'm not trying to be cute. I'm just trying to explain to you that there are probably a couple of 100 customers we might not be able to get to for reasons that are beyond Maritime Electric.
Okay. I guess the next question is for Tanya, and this is pretty similar to, I guess, the question I asked on Thursday about the telcos. So I received a response back from a communications representative with the EMO, basically referring me back to the telcos to ask about how many cell towers are still in outage. I have managed to get a list from one of the telcos, to their credit, Bell, but none of the other telcos have provided me with this information of how many cell towers in PEI are still in outage. I have been assured that Bell is providing that information to EMO. So again, I'll ask, of the cell towers in Prince Edward Island, how many are still in outage at this stage?
Sure. So I guess, again, not to be cute on this either, but I really don't want to be reporting on behalf of the telecommunication companies, nor would I do for Maritime Electric or any other agency that represents into our Emergency Operations Center. They do report into us every day their status, and we sit as a table and we prioritize each other, making sure that critical resources and locations are prioritized for restoration. I think that's all I can offer. That would be a best question posed to those telecommunication companies, and hoping that they'll get back to you. That's all I can kind of say on that one.
Okay, that is what it is. They have not. Well, 3 of the 4 have not. So I guess last question to Mr. Lawler. So on Saturday, I basically called into the number related to that was given for the $250 program announced on Friday. This is around 2 p.m., so 24 hours after it was announced. The staff on the other end of the line didn't really know anything or weren't familiar with the $250 program at that point. I looked at the website for PEI, Fiona, and it did list details about the Provincial Disaster Financial Assistance Program, but not anything about the $250 program. Now, by around 2:30 or so, I saw that it had been updated, but still about 24 hours after it was announced, maybe 23. So I'm just wondering if you can kind of explain that. I mean, it sort of seems like there was a bit of a miscommunication there.
Yeah, no, thank you for raising this, and I certainly saw you sharing your experiences on social media. And again, thank you for bringing it to our attention. Certainly, we do our best to try to provide as accurate and as timely of information to everyone who is within the area of impact. In this case, as you know, the area of impact was vast in compared to other areas, not just within, or other experiences or other storms, rather, not just within Prince Edward Island, but certainly within Prince Edward Island, but also throughout the Atlantic region, including the Magdalen Islands. So we have certainly when we were made aware of your experience, and there were some others, to be fair, you weren't exclusive in having that negative experience. We make sure that we go back and we work with our comms teams and our contact center and say, okay, let's make sure that we're getting everything that we can as timely as possible. The reality is, as much as we are computerized and have a lot of processes that are somewhat automated, we also have a bunch of humans who are working very diligently and hard behind the scenes. And sometimes there's an error and there's a mistake. And I think that's really all that happened this time. I say all, I don't mean to belittle or certainly not think of any significance, because again, as I stated, it's important to us as the Red Cross that we are providing the most timely and accurate of information as possible. I will also offer that this one was a little bit of a different experience for us in that if we go back, well, just keeping it to Prince Edward Island, I'll use Hurricane Dorian as the example. There were some things in place today that weren't in place during Hurricane Dorian when it impacted the island. So, and by that I mean 211. And I know 211 has been doing unbelievably fantastic work of keeping islanders informed. Certainly the call volume has been very high. But again, we want to make sure that we're not duplicating a service that's already there for folks to go to. Now, you were asking about a very specific program, and that's fair, and it was one that the Red Cross was offering. So, of course, we should be able to inform you very articulately and accurately with clarity on what it is that's being done with that particular inquiry of the time. And again, it's unfortunate, and I apologize that that wasn't your experience, and for some others as well. Certainly, speed. The speed of information that's coming to us, at us, from us has been significant. We know it's difficult and challenging, and understandably so, for it to be absorbed for those who are looking for information so urgently and with those high levels of stress and anxiety. So we are working to get better each and every time. And there may be another speed bump or hiccup. I don't say that with complacency. I know that we've got a lot of really dedicated people behind the scenes trying to get better and tightening up the messaging. And we're working very carefully and closely with the province and Tanya and her team to make sure that we are having consistent messaging. So we'll continue to improve that. And if we do make another misstep, we'll rely on people to let us know, and we'll certainly do what we can to fix it ASAP.
And can you tell me how much the Provincial Disaster Financial Assistance Program, how much money has been dispersed to date, I guess, for that program, if at all?
None to date. The program essentially just officially launched today. So what that means is people will be calling us. Let me back up a step. They'll be going to, we recommend that people go to the Prince Edward Island government website and for disaster recovery. For those of you that can, I recognize there are still some that cannot, to determine whether or not the program is for you. It isn't for everybody, that's for certain. And it's going to vary on a lot of circumstances, but really, I guess if I could just very, high level talk about what is the intention behind the Disaster Financial Assistance Program, which is all but identical, maybe with some slight nuances from province to province, but it's a federal program administered at the provincial level. And in fact, for those who don't know, the Canadian Red Cross also managed that particular program at the request of the PEI government for Hurricane Dorian. Now, at that time, we had approximately 150 claims or files to contend with, and everything mixed from residential to small business to aquaculture, et cetera. The whole gamut was there. We know that this is going to be significantly higher in terms of claim volume. So we know that it's going to take a bit of time. But we've also increased our capacity. And a couple of things that we're doing differently here is that while we had the intake by phone, and it is for those who are listening or watching, there is a different phone number for this particular support. This is a very dedicated team focusing on disaster financial assistance. And that number is 1-833-966-4225. If you have access to the internet, if you have access to email, another way to have some inquiries sent to us, which really help to capture it well in writing, is by email, and it's simply at PEI support@redcross.ca. Again, so our intake crew will take a look at that, and then they'll figure, okay, is this something that's eligible? We've asked you to determine yourselves if you're eligible, but the program guidelines are set in cooperation by the feds and the Prince Edward Island government. They have their own set of guidelines, which we are administering to them. So just to clear the air, is that it's not, the Red Cross is not imposing any types of processes or rules, regulations. How does it work? This is very, I guess, the local authority, being the provincial government, they have the guidelines established, and we will adhere to those while we're processing the claims. I suspect it will take, it was roughly, Tanya could correct me on this, but it was about, an 8 to 10 months time frame for Dorian, in terms of when we started and kind of tried to wind it down and help people through that process. We anticipate it will be longer than that. We don't have a date in mind. There's no end date. We're going to go through as quickly, as fast as we can. But there will be a process along the way that if it's determined that, in fact, a claim is, in fact, eligible for DFA, there's a bunch of different documentation steps that have to happen. You can do this all online as well for those who have access to it. The best way to do that is to go through redcross.ca/Hurricane Fiona, and you'll be able to fill out, and you don't have to fill everything out at once. So if you start the process, you'll start to create your own file. And it's okay if you don't have everything done now, but there'll be a step-by-step guide on what to do. We'll also be providing guides for those who aren't able to go through the internet. We'll be able to send packages to those who require it. So shortly, we don't have the firm date set yet, but as we're starting the intake now, we will also plan to have in-person support, at our Charlottetown office and perhaps some other locations, because we know, again, that the impact is vast right across the province. The dates and details of that are not yet known. They are still being worked on quite diligently behind the scenes. So if somebody shows up today looking to apply right on the site for disaster financial assistance, there's not going to be anybody there to help them walk through that process. We can help share the key messages that I'm doing right now, but in terms of the greater support and capacity that we know we're going to need on the ground, it's just going to take us a little bit more time to get there. So thanks.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Unfortunately for timing, we're going to limit to 2 questions per reporter moving forward. Follow-up questions can be sent to Vicki after the briefing. Hina Long, Canadian Press.
Hi, this is a question for the Premier and for Maritime Electric. Some of the questions from people that we're getting are, when Maritime Electric and the province knew that the storm was coming, why were they so ill-prepared? And another question that we're getting is, why weren't we told that we could maybe move somewhere else, go somewhere else, like it's been done with Ian? So people could have electricity or heat and things like that, while the island and the province got everything back up on. Why weren't we steps taken when the storm was coming in?
I don't know who.
I think I can start,
Sure.
and then I'll certainly hand it over to Maritime Electric. I would certainly beg to differ that we weren't prepared. For a hurricane, I would say that we were unprepared for the scope and the severity because we've never seen a hurricane to this strength and this magnitude ever hit PEI. So it's pretty challenging to anticipate what Mother Nature is going to deliver. We knew in advance. We were, our shop, our PEI EMO was activated 4 days in advance, working with our partners, making sure everyone was well versed, that we're getting all the right information and preparing as best we could with that information, working with Environment Canada and the Canadian Hurricane Centre. So, again, I think, we're going to take a lot from this and say maybe we need to be even more prepared for these size and scope of emergencies and weather events. But again, this was historical in nature, the biggest storm, the most significant storm. So this is going to be our new benchmark that we're going to have to prepare from moving forward. Maybe Kim wants to add anything.
Oh, sure. I mean, I'm not sure if you're on Prince Edward Island or you've ever visited here. It is probably the most beautiful place in the world. And we were in a situation where we have never seen such a storm impact our island that I can recall. I've been at Maritime Electric for 15 years. I've talked to people that have retired from our company. They've never seen anything like it. I can assure you that we did do alerts and updates to our customers to make sure that they were watching the weather. I don't think anybody knew how hard it was going to hit Prince Edward Island. In terms of the Maritime Electric infrastructure, I did want to circle back to comment on that with you because I think it's really important to understand that Prince Edward Island is connected to New Brunswick through underwater submarine cables. They were intact and strong. Our transmission system that connects us, I always say like an extension cord from tip to tip, did have some lines down and I think a couple of poles, but nothing that worried us because we knew as soon as we could get to them that we could have those repaired. Our substations, over 30 of those units, those buildings, those structures, those landmarks that feed all of our communities and energize them, they were intact and strong. We have well over 110,000 poles on Prince Edward Island, and we lost, I think the number was close to 800. They were strong, but they were also hit hard, and they're built to Canadian standards. Our trees and debris that came down and pulled those wires down was in every community across PEI that I've heard of. So here on PEI, I don't think we ever expected it to hit that hard, but I don't think it's accurate to say that we weren't prepared. I think that when you think about the preparations that happened, not only before the event, but the support from tip to tip on this province of islanders helping each other out has been top drawer. And I can tell you that we had called crews and had them in place to come here before the storm hit, and we're still fielding calls from people all over the country trying to help us. In terms of our ability to respond in a storm, we were in a situation where, it's not winter, it's not snowstorms where we have plow operators escorting us to get to our customers. But the trees that were down, there were some places where we had to drive over them to get to our customers and get to the location. So I think we prepared. We always do prepare for the worst. I honestly do believe that. And we have a lot of lessons learned, I'm sure, and I'm looking forward to having all of our customers restored so we can spend some time going through our lessons learned. But every storm we do an assessment. We talk about what we can do better. So I do think that we did work hard to be prepared for this storm, and we don't want to see one customer out, let alone the situation that we're in right now.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure. Go ahead, Hema.
Hi. I was in Prince Edward. I was in PEI when the storm hit, and I did cover it from there. I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about what kind of pollution came up with the storm and the debris and with sewers, and what kind of cleanup are you looking at with that?
Well, for Maritime Electric, we do expect the cleanup in many of our communities to take several weeks because right now we are absolutely focusing on restoration. So for a while, people may see parts of poles or they may see some of the debris, for example, down, but we'll go back and get that. But that could be into the weeks and maybe even longer at this point. So that's from Maritime Electric's point of view. I'm not sure how you want to answer the other areas.
I guess I can say as well, after Dorian, we developed a kind of a recovery plan for storms of this nature. We're, again, working with all of our partners within our EOC of how would we expedite debris cleanup. So we had a lot of that stuff already in place. So we just kind of pulled that out in advance, and the day of Fiona, and dusted it off, make sure everything was accurate. The storm response page, for example, is one thing that we didn't have in play during Dorian. So that was, again, some key things that we learned from that event. So we've provided a lot more information sharing, preparedness activities in the last several years as well. I don't know, Premier, if you want to say anything.
That sounds great.
Carrie Campbell, CBC.
Hi, thank you. My first question is just a kind of like a few little bullet points on the same question for Bill Lawler. Regarding the $13 million you said that have been donated in support of Fiona relief, when does that money start rolling out? Does that include the federal matching funds? Do you not think the Canadians who are donating that want to see that money going to the people affected? And is there any sort of public accounting or assurance that the Red Cross provides to make sure that all of that money is actually spent in this region on support for this storm?
Thanks very much for the question. Happy, as always, to address and be completely transparent when it comes to financial donations to the Canadian Red Cross. I'm going to try to tackle each of those questions, and if I miss one, I'll leave it to you to remind me. But first and foremost, when the Red Cross launches an appeal for a disaster or a specific situation, community event or whatever, we do that in trust to make it, I guess, easier, for lack of a better word, from an auditing perspective. All of the funds received go into that specific trust. It's fully auditable by CRA. We also provide regular updates in terms of reports to donors and to the public, which are posted on our website, and they certainly will be for this specific program, or use of funds, rather. And again, as much as we are and we're committed and focused to supporting islanders as well, we have to develop a comprehensive program for all of those who are impacted in the region, for those who are certainly requiring some extra support. And that's exactly what those funds are intended to be used for. This does not include the matching dollars. So the way that program typically works, we report back on a regular basis to the federal government of what's happened, the activity in that account. And at some point in time, that will be matched by the federal government. And so in essence, be doubled. The matching opportunity, as last announced, I believe it's October 24th, is the current deadline for that matching initiatives. We've had some conversations, lots of inquiries from donors about the very thing that you're asking in terms of, okay, the total is rising, the urgencies and needs are growing. What are you doing, Red Cross, with the funds that were given to you for the very purpose of addressing those urgencies and needs? We're also getting questions from those who are donating or are about to donate because there's a little bit of confusion amongst verified need. I'm not challenging the need within the province of Prince Edward Island or anywhere for that matter. We know the needs are vast, but people are also well aware and in tune with some of the other initiatives that have been announced by provincial governments to kind of address some of those real immediate urgent needs, like the ones we've talked about here today. As an example, the $250 for to use for whatever really the household determines is their most urgent of priorities. I can assure you, there are discussions. I've been involved with them today. I will be for the remainder of the week. And our hope is that by the end of this week, we will have something announced and able to provide an update to those who would be eligible to receive. Now, when I say eligible, we're trying to do a little bit more fact finding. So there's two different elements to it, and probably more than two, but I'll give you two critical ones. I mentioned this on Friday, but certainly I'll repeat it because it changes every day, and it's the number of those who are impacted. So we're going to have a certain amount of funds. We don't know exactly what that will look and feel like, but we're going to have an amount of money. And we know that the needs are going to be great and they're going to be long-term. So we need to try to find some semblance of a balance with understanding, how do we address and support those so urgently who need it right away, when we know that there's also going to be some much longer term situations for, unfortunately, it looks like many, and unfortunately, I can't be more precise than many, because the bottom line is we don't know, and many of the people who were impacted don't know yet. They know they were quite badly impacted, and I'm really speaking specifically to PEI now. Some more so than others. They can tell by their own, assessment capabilities. In other cases, they're going to need to bring in someone, an insurance adjuster or other type of adjuster to look at the property and assess, okay, is this structurally sound? What does the repair look like? Is it limited to my home? Is it over to my business? Is it, all kinds of different things that are going to be needed. I don't want that to translate into frustration from a timing neither to donors nor to those beneficiaries or those individuals who have been impacted. As I mentioned earlier in my overview of, we have to be really diligent in how we make sure that we are getting the funds to those who are validated and need to have it on behalf of the province. We have to do that exact same process for these donated dollars. Canadians and people abroad have contributed to this in the significance. I mean, prior to this particular event, speaking exclusively to Atlantic Canada, when we launched an appeal for other types of disasters, weather-related events, we had, going back in time, but it was 2003, and we had raised approximately $2 million, and that was over a period of time. This has been launched, it's been 8 days, give or take, 9 days, and we're at this $13 million. Isn't that wonderful that we're going to have an opportunity to develop some programs and some immediate assistance for those who need it the most? So if anyone's listening or watching and saying, I'm not sure that do they need it? I mean, they have $13 million, that's a lot. It doesn't include the federal matching. That is a fact. However, I think the needs, it's pretty safe to say, are going to be quite vast and quite widespread, not just throughout the island, but certainly throughout the province of Prince Edward Island, and unfortunately, well beyond. You didn't suggest this, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but just as an example, if we looked at the number of households that were registered today, and if we were applying the sole indicator of speed to get money into the hands of those who need it the most, quick math, I could be corrected, you'd be looking at approximately $400, $420 per household. Is that the best way, the most effective way to channel this $13 million? We need to make sure that we are getting this right. And thankfully, provinces such as Prince Edward Island, and there are other announcements and other programs and different levels of impact in different communities and so on, are doing everything they can to put some urgent funds into the hands of islanders, as soon as possible. I mean, just with today's announcement, 5,000 households are going to receive this $250 initiative, That means by the end of the day today, there's going to be $1.25 million in islanders' hands that was not there this morning. And that's just today. And we're going to continue to do this as people register and get some support. Back to the appeal, which was a specific question that you were asking me. We will have donor reports. We have accountability reports that are posted online. We welcome anytime questioning on how those use of funds will be. We know it can be a source of confusion and urgency for folks, but we also know that often there's some things that are stated about how the funds are being used or not being used. And I'll lean on social media, and one person makes a comment about what they think or they thought they heard was going to be done with those funds, when in fact it's not the case at all. But by the time it comes to our attention, it's been retweeted or liked or shared X number of times, and all of a sudden it's become the gospel truth, when in fact there's no truth to it at all. That's a very general comment for sure, and I know it applies to every organization, and certainly not exclusively to Canadian Red Cross. I can assure you, we take the trust that Canadians and others around the world have put in us with this $13 million very seriously, and we will get this right. And I really look forward to providing some type of an announcement, I'm hoping, by the end of the week.
Okay, if I can get in one more. I know that was a long one. Can someone explain to me who develops we keep hearing about this list of priorities for restoring electricity, and there's been lots of things on that list. There's been, primary or healthcare services and schools and essential services and businesses and seniors. I just want to understand whose list is that and who decides how it's deployed. We got an email today that there are still 7 provincial seniors housing complexes without power. We've been visiting today a community care facility in Charlottetown without power, and a long-term care facility and another community care facility that just recently had their power restored. And I want to understand, if these were some of the more challenging areas, then did we discover that and then go to restore some other power and then come back to this later, or have we been working on these facilities since day one? Because I think there's a lot of islanders who think that maybe these facilities should have somehow been bumped up the seniority list if that was possible. So, and whoever wants to take that on.
Well, I'll circle back and kind of start just around quickly in the beginning. At the beginning, when you talked about asking about the list, well, we have critical infrastructure by, and I keep saying east, west, and central, but that's how we break it down once we know that the cables are okay and transmission is okay, or the substations. The other thing that we really focused on were the issues around fuel and grocery and restaurants, and but even way before that, it was all about making sure that we had the hospital, our Riverside circuit that we could get up in terms of making sure that the Irving Tankard area was ready to go. In terms of the, to answer specifically around your question on the nursing homes or seniors places, there was a couple that have been really hard to have the rebuild done. It's not that they weren't a priority. They were part of an area where that was being rebuilt, and I think that's the number of poles that were down, or the work specifically in those areas. So, certainly the government has a list of all of their infrastructure. EMO has a list, and then depending on the storm, it can depend how you address those, what areas have been hit the hardest. So layer on top of that, we do try to get on as many customers as we can at a time. So to answer your particular question, yes, they are our priority. The other question is just that, if you're saying to me, were the crews there, or did they check? They were definitely part of that assessment. We did our best to communicate if we could, if we knew how long it was going to be. But if the infrastructure wasn't feeding into that locale, then you can't really power it from a system energization perspective for Maritime Electric. So I did want to mention that to you in terms of making sure that, we did that with hospitals. We did that with our list. There were people advocating to make sure that these areas were known. We do know about them. They are in our customer list as well. But in many of those cases, it was primarily around building that infrastructure to get in.
Julianne, Radio Canada.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My question will be for Kim Griffin. Kim, last week I asked you the question about, do you have a target for people that we to the system? If I heard you correctly, you said that you are seeing maybe on Sunday you will be close to 100%. Is it correct to say like the target for 100% is it will be the end of this week or next week?
I think it's, if I caught your question correctly, I think what I've been saying is the larger number of neighborhoods that we're focusing on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Now there could be some areas like a Stanhope or a Brackley that have a lot of what we call the backlot feeds, so they're harder to get to because of all the trees. Some of them may still be into Thursday and Friday. But for example, with those, we'll be redeploying all the other crews to start focusing on the individual outages on Wednesday. So that being said, I'm not sure if the number is going to be 97 or 98% with all the individual outages and having customers restored on Sunday, on Thanksgiving weekend. In terms of the others that we may not be able to get to our customer because we may be ready on our end, but they may not be ready on their end. The other variable is that while I think electricians are really going to step up and really try to help our customers, there's also some other damages that may be a factor. So that's why I'm saying the 97, 98% and the best that we can. For me to predict the number of customers beyond that, I'm just not sure I would have that information.
My second question would be maybe for you, but maybe for everybody. Do you have already an idea what will be the total cost of this year? Millions, dozens of millions, hundreds of millions?
No, I don't have that yet.
I think.
Thank you. Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to say, Julian, I think it's, total from, I think it will be in the hundreds of millions. But, how high it goes, I don't know. But it's, when you look at the infrastructure, the wharves, everything else, that's the damage, it's pretty extensive. And I've heard an estimate of $700 million for Atlantic Canada or something in that ballpark of potential damage. So, but it'll be in the hundreds of millions.
Great. Thank you so much.
Nicola, Radio Canada. Nicholas, Radio Canada. Teresa Wright, Global News.
Hi there. I actually have 3 questions, 2 for the Premier, 1 for Maritime Electric, if you'll please indulge me. I'll try to keep them as quickly as possible. Premier, Nova Scotia is giving more money for people who lost food and announced it much sooner than you did. So they're farther ahead in terms of distributing that money to people who need immediate help. Why did it take a week to announce the $250 program, and why isn't more money being made available given how long so many have been left without power?
Yeah, thanks, Teresa. And I would say off the top that I'll be defensive of my media friends because I'm a former one, that I think the length of our issues today aren't to do with the questions. Maybe we could shorten our answers. So we'll be with you for as long as you need us here. I don't really get in much to trying to say we're better than this person or faster than that one. I think we've just come through the process of trying to respond as quickly as we can to get money out the door. The fact money's going out the door today, to me, is an incredible undertaking, and I'm grateful for the Canadian Red Cross. When you start a response that we have started here, you do so knowing that it whatever the amount is, it probably isn't enough. If we need to do more, we will revisit that. But we're trying to respond as fast as we can here and get money into the hands of Islanders. And I don't know what the programs in Nova Scotia are, how quickly they're going out the door. And but I trust my friend and colleague Premier Houston's working as hard as we are to respond as fast as we can.
Right, but I'm wondering though, why did it take a week for that money to even be announced?
As I said, we're trying to find the most efficient way to get money out to people as fast as we can. First of all, I don't know what the first couple of days will look like. I mean, we're feeling our way through this. We knew the damage was extensive, but I don't know if anybody thought on day one that we would be, into multiple days such as this without power for a lot of people. So, we're trying to measure that damage, and it's. I do know that when you're in the job I'm in, the 2 things that are always out there is that the money you put out there is never enough, and it's never fast enough. But we're just trying to do the best we can.
And just a little bit earlier, one of my colleagues asked a question about the telecom companies, and we didn't really get a response. Some people I've spoken to say they believe a public inquiry is needed into the response to this disaster to ensure that there is proper accountability for the private companies and NGOs involved, including telecom companies, Maritime Electric, Red Cross, everyone. Will you commit to a public inquiry into this response?
I think we will certainly commit to trying to have a complete review of this. This is the biggest thing we've ever dealt with. We know there are things we've done well. There are things that we haven't done well, and that's, I guess, the way these things work. Whether or not it's a public inquiry or whatever form it takes, we will do a comprehensive review. I mean, I would never say no to something like that if we can learn a little bit more. But right now we're focused on trying to get the lights back on and trying to get money into the hands of people as fast as we can. But I would never say no to it, but we'll certainly do a very thorough, comprehensive review and try to learn from this and move forward.
Just finally, my question for Kim. Last Wednesday, the board of directors of Fortis put out a press release sharing the news that the company is marking 49 years of increased dividends. This was on day 5 of many Islanders sitting in the dark. What message does it send when your company is celebrating its corporate revenues while tens of thousands of Islanders remain without power?
Oh, hi, Teresa. I can speak to that in the sense that Fortis Inc. would follow a quarterly reporting for the shareholders as part of the market. So, certainly that's just part of the business cycle in terms of the reporting. I can certainly let you know that across the subsidiaries from the Fortis network, they have all reached out and either are here to help us or have reached out from a resources perspective. So I think that, from our perspective and in terms of Fiona restoration, those are the things that we try to do to help each other in a storm.
Joey Black here, Eye Opening Views.
Yes, this one's for Tanya and or Kim. If someone wants, how can they use help if you want more hands on deck, shall we say, with the disaster cleanup? Is there any way someone could come out and help?
If I understand the question, if people were wanting to volunteer or something like that, I think all of these folks, safety again is our top priority, and I know Maritime Electric has, spoken about the certifications that are required in order to do that safely, and we are still getting offers of assistance for some of that debris cleanup. Our focus still is around getting power back on and roads open safely. I think that recovery process may take another shape once that is complete. So, that could be still an opportunity. But, just as a reminder that if individuals are looking here on the island to get assistance with cleanup on their properties, and I'm just going to look, and I have a phone number here. You can dial 1-833-734-1873 or sign up at any Access PEI locations, or you can even send an email to fionacleanup@gov.pe.ca. So that will at least get you on a list. Again, we'll be focusing on cleaning off the roads, getting power first, and then recovery will follow after that.
And my second question, since the hurricane, in the seniors complexes now, are they mostly in Charlottetown, or are they any in Summerside? And how many with the health issues?
I think you might be referring. Oh, sorry, Joe.
Power room.
Yeah, I think you might be referring without power. I think there are 7. Many of them are in the Charlottetown area. I think there's one in Mount Stewart, and I'm trying to think where else. But it's essentially along those main arteries that are the most difficult to get back online, and it's unfortunate. I know any islander who's been 9 days without power, how frustrating it is, and but we're just going to try to do everything we can to help them, and we've sort of put in place a network of supports, whether they're meals and other things, to try to make sure those people are looked after. But it's tough days for them, and as it is for many islanders.
That's all the questions we have for today.
Thank you. Well, thank you, everybody. That was an extended version. We'll have I guess they call it the director's cut in the media business, but we'll have hopefully the next time a little more trimmed down version. But appreciate everybody helping out and getting the information out there as fast as we can. So thank you very much.